Good, excellent. So, very good morning for everyone, and thank you very much for joining us here and starting the Big Fortified Tasting with us in this masterclass. My name is Adam Odor, and I am the ambassador for School of Port here in the UK. And we are going to talk about the relevance of port wine for the 21st century. It's so good to see so many faces that we've met before, various trade tastings. I know some of you already actually know what School of Port is about. You've been to our website, you've done our masterclasses, but let me just give you a quick introduction so that we would know where we are from. So we are fighting the tyranny of predictable. Port wine is a fantastic category, very, very important for both Portugal and the British market. But there was a notion that the younger generation can't relate to it, and we are the answer for it. And who we are a non-profit educational organization based in Porto, established in 2020 by the Symington family estate. What we do is we try to engage in an informal, inclusive way with anyone that works in the trade or a wine lover and would like to know more about port wine. Our aim is to demystify port wine as such, so to make sure that people would approach it as it should be approached, because port wine is such a versatile wine, as many of you would know. It's just the consumer needs to know as well. So a quick word on the Symington family estate. As you would know, they are the largest landowners in the Douro Valley. Still family-owned company, currently run by the fourth and fifth generation. 130 years connection to the culture of Douro. And we actually happy to have Anthony from Symington family estate here with me presenting, as well as our friend Óscar Quevedo, also port winemaker himself. So we will taste their wines and see how we can actually apply certain business models through those wines. But then, so the port wine trade? I'm sure you all know the history. We're actually lucky enough here at the Big Fortified Tasting, several authors who wrote books about it are here. Julian's definitely here. I bet that Richard and Godfrey will be here as well. So you can check, like, it goes back to 400 years. It started with the usual quarrels across the channel, losing our access to the clarets that we so got used to. Finding a new market for us, and this was Portugal. And although the first wines were not entirely to the British taste, as you might imagine, but then fortification came in the picture, and then vintage port, as we know it, was invented, especially with the cylindrical bottles. Declarations came on board, and then basically we got to the point when the 20th century had its ups and downs. Changes in the social fabric in Portugal as well as in the UK. And then now here we are in the 21st century. So let's just check, like, what do we as School of Port feel like is the strength and the weakness of the port trade as we know it today? What we feel that one of the strengths is that it is indeed culturally ingrained into this island's drinking culture. We can relate to port wine because our parents, our grandparents, they used to drink it. We know it well, or that's what often, this is what we find out, we think we know it well. But it is there, and it is widely available. You must remember that if you leave the UK, if you go to other countries in Europe, it's not so easy to find port. Here you can buy it at wine shops, supermarkets, order online, it's there. If you want to buy port, it's there. So I think we can say that it's relatively widely available. And this is a fine wine. It is in a position that it's served in restaurants. It's available at the table as something equivalent to the wines that we know and we can connect to. And of course it is an established category in the wine world. If you do your WSEPs, you will learn about fortified, you will learn about port. So it is all here for us. However, what I feel is that the weakness is that there is indeed a limited exposure to the wine. Why would we say that? It is often treated as a dessert wine or a pudding wine, which it indeed is, but it's not just that. It is a very limiting term, because if you come to think of it, in the 16th, 17th, 18th century, sweetness was the norm. You couldn't find sweetness anywhere else. You needed a sweet wine. And nowadays, sweet equals to dessert. But you will see it later that there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more to port and sweet wines than meets the eye. The other is the insufficient storage and service. I mean, am I the only person that, let's say, walks into a pub and lucky enough to see that they, on their wine list, they have port wine? And then I look behind the bar, and what do I see? There's a half a bottle of Ruby Port, God knows how long being opened, under the light, exposed to light and heat. This isn't really doing any favor to the wine. It's not going to be the wine that the winemaker intends to show to the customer. And of course, the young stuff members can't really relate to port wine. I've spoken to numerous young people behind bar, sommeliers even, and they know what port is if you're lucky. Sometimes they don't even know what port is, so you have to start from the beginning. It's a sweet fortified wine from the Odor Valley in North Portugal. That's fine, but they can't really relate to it. They don't have any exposure to it, and they are supposed to be people who serve the consumers. So I think this is indeed a weakness that we have to work on. Incorrect product placement. Anyone ever walked into a supermarket looking at the wines? I occasionally do, I must admit. I just look at like the wine list, so how they place the product. And not once, not twice, I found port wine under spirits. How did that happen? Because it is certainly not a spirit, it's a wine. If you come to think of it, it's only like 4 or 5% more than, let's say, a strong Italian red. What's 4% of beef friends? But this is not the right place. People will not find port wine, or will not have the same association port wine if they go to find it under the wrong section. And of course we have those false associations with port wine. There was a couple of surveys conducted on that, and there is indeed a mold that people's have in the UK about port wine. This is something that School of Port is trying to fight. Let me just share you a couple of points, like what do people online think about port based on how they share it. Everyone knows that in the UK, port is a one-type drink. Port is red, predominantly. People don't even know that there's Julio wine. Or pig, for that matter. It is mostly associated with posh and wealthy and conservative type. It is rather old and masculine. And also people think like, if I say port, you would say Stilton, anyone? Port and cheese, they go hand in hand. But that's all that people think. What about all the other options? This is a very strong association. And the other thing is, it's a Christmas drink. Why would I drink it any other time than Christmas? Go to Portugal and see it yourself, by the way, so you don't really need Christmas to enjoy good port. And although these associations are indeed useful, because they show what the picture was 50 years ago, but then over the past half a century, what happened is that new categories emerged due to the social fabric changes. LBVs came about to come between the mainstream Ruby Port and the vintage, to make sure that people can actually access it without decanting immediately. I think that the majority of the port that we will taste here are plug and play. You don't even need a bottle opener apart from the vintage ports, of course. If you want to know why, you have to go to School of Port and watch the video on why some ports are closed with cork and why some with a stopper cork. But then the way we can fight port is focusing on the relevance. Now, what is a relevance? So relevance really depends on the point of view. Port means something different for the port producer, something different for the consumer, something different for the government of Portugal. What I would like to focus in is why port relevant for the UK still, and the young drinkers, the future drinkers. So first thing is, if you look at the so-called trends, these are a lot more than, you know, like low and no alcohol. It's a bit hard to find, isn't it, with 20% alcohol? But mindful drinking, people want to know what they drink, where the drink comes from. These are not just buzzwords, these are genuine needs from our customers, and we have to answer it if we want to win their hearts, and if we want to make sure that they drink what is produced in the Douro Valley. We can focus on the provenance, which definitely has. So port always comes from the Douro Valley. Anyone been in the Douro Valley? Okay, I think I'm teaching my grandma to suck eggs here. But yeah, so you know exactly what we're talking about. If you've ever been to the Douro once, you will never think the same way port wine. The Douro itself is one of the major tools that we can use to sell more port and to change how people think about port wine. And the other is the history and the adventure. So once you've been to the Douro and Porto, you will be able to associate what 400 years means, and 400 years of presence and constant evolution and changes. The other thing we can relate to is health-conscious drinking and the natural wine. I don't like to use the word movement because this is indeed very important for people to know that consumers know that wine is a natural product, yet it involves at least a form of manufacturing, at least a form of helping nature to make the most out of the great moss. And people think it's like a new thing, but vintage port, for example, has been a natural wine ever since it's been invented. It's the best nature can produce. It's bottled unfined, unfiltered after 2 years in vat, and then it ages in the bottle. As you will hear from these two distinct gentlemen here. The other is, it's a heart of a region and it's a cultural bridge. If you come to think of it, port, as I said, it's already ingrained into the British drinking culture. So somehow we feel that this is at least as much a British drink as it is Portuguese. It's such a cultural bridge between the two nations. It's such a door to the heart of your consumers. That it would be a mistake not to focus on that. And of course the versatility of the drink. And we all know that it's a versatile drink. We're all port lovers here, so we know that there's white, there's tawny, there's ruby, there's vintage. But for the consumer, that's not what matters. For them, versatility means something else. For example, accessibility. When I want to pop open a bottle of port at home, do I need a port tongue? Do I need an arso? Or do I need even a corkscrew? Or can I just open it up, pour a glass, and then put it back in the fridge? We've got accessible port all over the range. On the other end of that accessibility scale, there is a time and place for that special historic connection when you actually do use an arso, maybe a port tongue if you're lucky. Anyone has a port tongue at home? There you go. Told you.
That's it. I didn't.
Well, even if I would, I don't know. It wouldn't look very good over the gas stove. So, but I see the point. So, your consumers might not have, but when they go out and drink out and eat out, this would be an impressive moment for them to see how it's done. So, that's versatility. plug-and-play port and the old traditional for the special moment. The scale of complexity. Yet again, you've got ports that are simple, easy to approach, fruit forward. If you just introduce someone to port wine, it's just a perfect tool. And then all along to the very complex and elegance, your 63s, your 47s, ooh, let's get realistic, 81s, 83s, 85s. What about those? They are nice, complex strings. On the other end of the scale, there is a moment for both, and loads in between. Lifestyle, the different moments in your life when you want to enjoy port. You've got port that evokes adventure, that evokes quiet, that evokes higher moments, like what we call it, it's like higher energy moments when you go out and drink with your friends. There's port for that, white port and tonic. I really don't want to ask how many of you heard of white port and tonic, because I'm sure that you all heard about it. But when I'm out there with consumers, sometimes with trade professionals, they all say like, oh my god, white port? What is it? And then when I go to white port and tonic, they say like, that's interesting. And white port is not the only port that we can use for cocktails, by the way. More info, schoolofport.com. Other vessels, it's like creating moments that that are special in your life. When you buy a wine that has your vintage year, is this a special wine? Birthdays, anniversaries, leaving dues, all have port. Either gives you a snapshot of time with a collator or a vintage, or it might give you a certain period of time, 30 years, 40 years, 20 years, 10 years, somewhere. Perfect wines to celebrate and create the moment. And of course we've got the food pairing, and this is my particular pet project, because we all know port as a dessert wine, a pudding wine. Which is true, in the sense that it is a sweet wine. But most people that I speak to and I tell them, have you tried port? And they say, like, no, I don't drink sweet wine. No. Because they associate a sweet wine as sweet only. It's like saying 20% alcohol is the major metric to look at port wine. Alcohol is one of more than 100 components in a wine. We can't really just judge the book by the cover. And the same thing about sweetness. Port is extremely fresh. And it pairs beautifully, not just with sweet desserts, but also with savory food. Again, more videos online at schoolofport.com. But we would definitely encourage anyone in the on trade to create a savory meal pairing with sweet wines. Port would be the perfect connection. But this would open up doors in people's minds that would change their perception of what a sweet wine is.
Thanks, Adam.
Absolute pleasure. Anthony?
It's a pleasure to be here with you guys today. So, my name's Anthony Symington, fifth generation of my family to make port in the Odor Valley, and it's a great pleasure to be here with Óscar Quevedo, who is also a multi-generational port producer in the borough. And I think it's one of the special things about where we're from, and some of you guys have been out to visit us, and those of you who haven't, I strongly recommend you come, is the Odor is going through a transformatory period right now. Like, there is so much excitement, so many exciting things going, not just on the port side, but also on the still wine side. Today is just a day about fortified, but I'm sure you've all seen some of the phenomenal red and white wines coming out, and also on the port side as well, some of the innovation that's coming. I think our grandparents would never have expected would ever happen. I mean, the second white is one of Óscar's wines is really exciting. A 30-year-old white tawny port that I know my grandfather was the one probably didn't even. There's a reason, we don't have any of it, because he didn't think we could let it down. But what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of excitement in port. So to go back to the premise of this masterclass, like what is the relevance of port in the 21st century? I think drinks are always cyclical, and I definitely think we're on an upward curve on port at the moment. There's a huge tourism boom to Portugal, which helping drive it with sort of many individual ambassadors coming back into the market. There's obviously that legacy of that history between the UK and Portugal, which makes England as sort of a flag, a key cornerstone of it. The School of Port, which you dumbed yourself down on a bit, that we came up with the idea in just before COVID really, and the idea is to help you guys on the trade, because there's a large rotation of staff, as you guys all have, so constantly having the members of your team fully trained and up to scratch on all of the wines that you offer, let alone just a more niche category like port, is very difficult. And as much as we try and help you do that, we can't be everywhere, all over the country all at the same time. So the idea behind School of Port was to make it easier and more digestible for everybody, particularly in the trade, mainly in the on-trade, but also the off, to get up to speed and get their head around some of the intricacies of port. And Nicole, who's standing at the back, took our idea and turned it into something far better than I could ever have envisaged. And if you haven't looked on the website yet, please do after today, because there's a really, truly amazing series of courses that are sort of bite-sized, very easy to do in 20-minute periods. So if you can get any of your team to do it within the first stage, which is more the entry, they'll have like a good idea of the breadth and the diversity of port, how to pair it, how to serve it in your establishments, to ultimately increase the profitability, because everybody runs a business and the bottom line at the end of the month is what counts. And if we can help you achieve that, then I think everybody's in the winner. And to achieve it in an enjoyable way to add value to your customers, that's even more important. And so there's this really easy to access course, and for those that are interested, you get a certificate at the end. And then if anybody wants to take it to the next level, we can, or the School of Port guys, can arrange bespoke programs for your teams, which can either be in person or online. And the people we've done it with, I see a couple of you guys from Hotel de Vin here, have really helped in their individual establishments. But anyway, I'll shut up about that and get on to the more fun part, which is the tasting. So we've chosen 6 wines to try and show the diversity of the port category. As Adam mentioned before, some people from the outside, less in the trade obviously, don't necessarily understand quite how diverse the port category can be, and they think maybe their go-to is a reserve ruby style of port. First 2 glasses, you've got white port. We used to always joke that we only made white port for my grandmother. It was sort of, I think it's the only reason she's still alive. Nothing else can live in her body because she's drank so much white port. But on a more serious note, a very small percentage of grapes in the Odor are red. Oscar reminded me last week that Robert Coben's phrase, what was it? It's like, if it's not red, it's not worth it.
The first beauty of port is to be red.
Yeah. And so very little white port was made. But then with the tourism boom to Portugal over the last 10 years, particularly to Porto and Lisbon, and people enjoying a white port and tonic on the terraces, we really felt we really needed to up our game. So the first one, Harry and Ian, do you mind lining up the bottles on the table afterwards? So they stole our bottle.
Sorry.
We thought, so white port and tonic, you mentioned low ABV, so although port is 20%, that's half of a spirit, so it plays into that trend. So if you mix white port 1/3 white port, 2/3 tonic, sprig of mint, slice of lemon, it's the easiest cocktail in the world to make, a P&T, it's half as alcoholic as a gin tonic, so it plays into that trend. Not that I personally am particularly bothered about low or no, but I know it does is increasingly important or relevant to the end consumer. And so we produced this blend number 5 white port, which has all of the illustrations of the garnishes one would use and some of the things it's in a sort of attractive bottle, more to appeal to the younger or a type of consumer that wouldn't necessarily automatically step into port. We cold ferment it to preserve those aromatic qualities of the grapes. We only use two white varieties here, Malvasia Fina and Muscatel de Lega, which are very aromatic. They give that lovely, almost like elderflower quality in the glass. And the idea here being that it's a half-sweet style of port, so a male circle. So the touch of sweetness there balances with tonic perfectly. So the bitterness and tonic balances with the sweetness, and the same the other way around.
Far side. So we'll just sort you out.
But yeah, anyway, so the idea behind this wine was to make it enjoyable on its own, straight, as it is now, served chilled, or equally mixed, predominantly as a port and tonic, which is a lovely sort of summery, fresh style of wine. And then what you guys might not have expected with white port is this amazing wine that Oscar's about to introduce, which I'm really excited to taste as well.
Thank you, Anthony, for the opportunity to be here today. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Nicole. It's a pleasure to be here talking about our ports and talking about port in general. We are a small family business. We are based in the Odor Valley, and for many decades we were selling making the port, producing the grapes, making the port, and selling it in bulk to the merchants that were based in the locality, companies like Symington and a few others. And the white port was not really on the map at all. So my great-grandparents were producing the grapes, they were making the port, and they were not able to sell it. So they would stock it, put it aside when they could afford it, and drink it. And what we have now, and getting on Adam's words, it's a market that is going down in volume overall, but actually going up in the special categories. And that's where I think we should focus. We are focusing our tasting today. We're presenting the 6 different ports on the categories that are growing and that can be interesting for you to present. The port sales in the supermarkets are suffering, but that's the really lower tier of the port collection. We have a huge demand from younger and older generations for older ports, including a lot of white ports. The white port category is growing a lot. The Symingtons have brought a lot of innovation with the special blends that they do. They have this white, but also have a ruby on this special blend for the Grants brand. What we have today, what I'm presenting to you as the first port, is a 30-year-old white. A lot of this port is from the 80s, from the 90s as well. It's a bit of the opposite of the Graham's white that you just tasted, which is that the first white port is very much on the primary notes, a lot of floral notes. While here, all that freshness is gone. There's no fresh notes, in my opinion, left in the port. What we have is the complexity of nuttiness, the old leaves, and what it also shows is that there can be a lot of length in white port as well, once left in barrel for several years. Something that is very, very important is the temperature of serving. We grew up saying that we serve wine at room temperature. Well, room temperature 50 years ago, 100 years ago, was not the same temperature as your home is in the winter. You know, those times of the 15, 16 degrees are gone. Your house is probably 20, 21. If you are in an environmental friendly, maybe a little below 20, but it's definitely not on those perfect temperatures to serve a red wine. And white wine needs even lower temperatures. White grapes have much less tannins. Tannins are bitter and can get bitter on the palate if they serve low temperature. As we have pretty much no tannins in white wines in general, so we can confidently serve 10 or below. And that's a big flavor that you should to your port. Alcohol is very volatile. That's why it's used so much in the perfume industry. So they can fix the flavors, you spray, and alcohol disappears. If you serve alcohol at higher temperature, you feel a lot alcohol in the glass. So my suggestion, don't be afraid of serving white port at 10 or below straight from the fridge. It will warm up quickly in the glass and in the room as time goes. So if it's too cold, people always have the chance of warming it up or just wait. If it's too warm, there's no way back.
I think it's also really interesting to, let alone introduce people to white port, but then these are polar opposites in terms of drinks. So you've got one which is a sort of very nice, refreshing, almost summer spritz type, and then this very complex, nutty, amazing wine that would be really interesting to try and pair with dishes. What would you normally?
The best food suggestion that I had for white port was foie gras. For those that are foie gras lovers, it's stunning.
I think, as Adam mentioned before, one can be creative with your food pairings. But a bit, I personally am not, although the white obviously is an aperitif, I personally don't necessarily think we should try and claim that we can be paired with every course in a meal. Yeah, of course you can get those esoterical ones, those one-offs, but actually where we win in the port category is as a dessert wine. And I think particularly Tawny Port, which we're getting onto now, in my humble opinion, is probably the most versatile of all the dessert wines in terms of pairing. One might often think of the traditional of cheese, but that's much more for the ruby styles or the vintage styles, whereas with Tawny, I think you think, because that's sweetness, you think similarities. So I would go, depending on the occasion, but to like milk chocolate, chocolate fondants, creme brulees, ice cream, vanilla ice cream, all of them work amazingly, or even just a bar of chocolate on the sofa watching telly at the end of a long day. I joke, but I actually think it's true, that my wife married me for access to Tawny Port. She's a teacher, and if she has a tough day at work, I get a text saying there better be a bottle in the fridge. And that's key, as Óscar mentioned before about the white Tawny, is with Tawny Ports, serve them chilled from the fridge. That volatility in the alcohol is key to bring down the temperature a bit. Like ideally around 13 degrees if you can, and that really creates this wonderful drink. And in terms of a style, I think this is really the growth area of port over the last 20 years. Like Tawny Port sales globally have doubled. It's the premium category of port, is the future of port. All the wines we're showing today are the premium sector. Maybe the entry level, your BOB rubies and tawnies that are sold very cheaply in the supermarkets, those volumes might be declining, but actually in the premium end, that's where the interest is being piqued for the consumer. And if we can activate it, where School of Port can help you activate that with your customers, that's where you can be onto a winner. So whether it's in the on or the off, like in the on trade, serving Tawny Port from these large format bottles like we're doing here today really helps. The human being is a vain creature by nature, and we get excited by a shiny thing. So if the table next to you has a fun bottle being served, inevitably it's going to start a conversation that if your staff can properly work, will end up you serving more glasses at the end of the meal. Which is a great way to, I think, as Óscar said, it's a great way to prolong that enjoyment, create those memories. I think we're very lucky as winemakers that we are in the memory creation business. We make something that is there to enhance people's evenings or lunches with their family or friends and create those moments to remember. And in a restaurant, sorry for those of you in the off trade, but I'm just thinking about the restaurants for the moment. In a restaurant or even at home, if you can bookend that experience and prolong it, that's what people will remember when they'll be their take home when they go home. So rather than just you finish your meal, here's your coffee and your bill, and out you go because we've got to make a table for somebody else. If you're able to serve a glass of port, help them have, like, I challenge any one of you in this room to tell us that you don't like the next two wines that are being served. I think we're very lucky that we make a style of drink that 99% of people enjoy. We just have to help them get there. So if you're able to help them have a lovely glass of port with a dessert or without a dessert and just ease that end of the meal, that's just going to help elevate the rest of the meal. So your chefs, the other wines you've served have all been at the top level, so why not also have that at the end and just create that all-round experience. We're all in the experience industry, aren't we? That's what works. And yeah, I mean, I think sorry, we've gone on a bit of a tangent, but
yeah, there is one interesting thing, Anthony, which is the market uses a lot on the vintage port and the ruby style. So the ruby style of port goes to bottle at a very early stage, after 2, 3, 4 years, no longer than that. So it develops in the bottle without contact with oxygen. So that's the tradition, the history that is behind is that the port will be loaded on the ship in cask and will be bottled here in England a few years after the harvest. So it did not really develop a net-cheap character, it did not really develop any oxidative notes. What you're tasting now is exactly the opposite. It's port that has been aging for many years in cask. It has been in contact, indirect contact with oxygen that goes through the pores of the oak stakes and slowly oxidize the port. So these ports, the tawny ports start being ruby, like red wine color. It's the time in cask that's going to change the color. And during this process, we are slowly oxidizing the flavors, not the same way that we do when we leave open cut apple on the top of the table that turns brown after 10 minutes. No, it takes much longer. There is no direct oxygen on it, but the flavors change completely. And what happens is that once you open a bottle of tawny port, it's not going to change a lot. It has been in contact with oxygen for several years, for decades in some cases. So the longevity, once it's open, it's much longer than on the ruby side. So don't be afraid of serving a bottle of tawny port that was opened a couple of months ago, because it's probably still fresh and in great conditions.
yeah, it's not a spirit, so you can't leave it for a year or so, but 6 weeks or so is absolutely fine, especially if you keep the wine chilled in a fridge. It's those lovely, nutty, almost like salted toffee characteristics that come through on the aged tawnies that are really special and make it so appealing to a wide range of palates. So it's slightly chilled. I think the key to a lot of people can make tawny port, but the key to excellent tawny ports, like the two you have here, is to get that balance in the acidity, the sweetness, and the alcohol. You get any one of those out of kilter, and you've either got something that's too flabby, or you get that hit of alcohol. So if you got that right, you've got a winner. What's really interesting of these two wines? So we've got a 20-year-old tawny port, which is an aged. It's a blend, a bit like non-vintage champagne being a blend of a few different years. So this is an average of 20 years, so it's about 6 to 8 component parts. Whereas the second tawny is really interesting because it's a creator, which means harvest, so Single Harvest Tawny, and it's a snapshot on an individual year, an excellent year as it was.
Exactly. So while in the 20 years old, the winemaker, the blender, looks for complexity, diversity. He's going to bring a little bit from this barrel, a little bit from that, so different years, different vintages. With a creator, the winemaker is committed since the year of production, and then it left in an oak barrel or in a bigger oak bin for several decades until bottling. So there's not as much that you can blend to change it. So it's probably not as complex and diverse, but it's much more precise. So you get the taste, you get what that certain vintage produced in terms of flavors and tastes. The 20 years old tawny here, it's the result of different years, probably much more complex in that sense. Does it make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It does. So expect a lot of consistency in a 10, 20, 30, 40 year old blend. The consistency here does not really exist because every vintage, every creator
Is unique.
So, creators, do you only produce it in when you think it's sufficient you did that year? Or you
It's
make
not
it
exactly
every year?
like a vintage.
Yeah. No.
So you produce it every year, you say that's going to go.
Yeah. Probably in different volumes. So when you have a great year for port production, you have everything is great. So you want to save and keep and bottle and don't sell anything because you know that's going to be amazing. But that rarely happens. So in general, what you do is to save those wines that have better conditions to age in oak casks. You save them for the tawny style, the old tawny style. We can use, and we used it in the past, part of this 1997 into our 20-year-old blend, which we can also do.
And I think wine's a living thing, so I hope I'm not speaking out of turn saying it to you, but definitely how we work is you choose to release this creator when it's at its peak, because wine does go up and down. So Oscar would have been tasting in '97 and following its evolution since its birth, and then at the stage that you think it's showing excellently is when you bottle a quantity of it, because this is the snapshot. And once you bottle it, you've encapsulated it, so it's stopped that oxidative period, and so it will just hold that.
It's also important to move them between larger and smaller containers. So a cask is about, it's about 600 liters of port. And we use much larger beans at the winery. The larger it is, the slower the aging process goes. So don't expect that every single bottling is going to be the same as the previous one. So we bottled these, I think, in last year, and the bottling before was about 8 years ago, and it's the same port, but matured in different containers, in different barrels for different periods of time. So there is some, it changes a little bit, from bottling to bottling, in that sense. But it's still always the same port. You cannot blend port from the different vintage.
And I think these single-year Tawny's, later single harvest, and also the aged examples, they attract consumer from the whiskey side. You can tell that the flavour profile would appeal to them. It's a good sort of entry point into the category for them. So moving on to the last two wines, which you're being served in your glasses at the moment. I forgot. Nicole did a really cool thing I've never seen done before, but you guys probably see loads. It's on this QR code on the bottom of the tasting map. It's got all of the information and tech sheets about the masterclass and the wine, which is great. So the last two wines that we're serving is two vintage ports, so the king of port in a way, but a younger one and a 30-odd-year-old one to show you the different styles even within vintage. And how, in this country particularly, we're often guilty of thinking that older is always better. But actually, in recent years, with advances in winemaking, equipment, monovarietal vineyards, to be a winemaker today, you have to have a chemistry degree. Basically, my grandfather was making wine because he'd learned from his father with barely any electricity in the Odor. And they still managed to make phenomenal wines. And with all the evolution today, it's even more precise, and you don't necessarily have to wait so long for those sort of rough edges to iron out, whether it's the spirit, the tannins, etc. So the wines are definitely approachable and much younger than they used to be. So we wanted to show you two different ages of vintage. So you've got a Quevedo 2017 and a Graham's 1994. In terms of flavour profile, totally different to the Tawnies. They don't have that period in oak, slowly oxidising. They're bottled very, very young on their sediment, so they keep evolving in the bottle. With a younger vintage port, you don't necessarily need to decant it. With an older one, you would, as that sediment forms. The decanting process, I don't want to offend any of you guys who know me, but it's remarkably easy. Vintage is the only style of port that you need to decant. The cheapest way of seeing it is whether it's got a T-top cork or a driven cork. If it's got a normal driven cork, that means you have to decant the wine. I assume everybody in this room knows how to decant, but for the benefit of those watching online, it's super simple. You stand the bottle up for half an hour so the sediment falls to the bottom, and you pour it slowly through a fine mesh leg. Muslin is the traditional thing, but anything works. We once had my cousin's wedding up in Scotland, and we got there, and obviously you can't be in our families or any of our families and not get married without port. We're in the middle of Scotland, and my uncle was like, shit, we don't have anything to decant with. And nylon tights, turns out, work really well. So we stole my grandmother's nylon tights from M&S. Apparently that's a good brand for decanting. Used, by the way. Not used. And we cut them up, and I used a bit of it over the decanting funnel, and the port was phenomenal. She was less happy because her tights looked like origami and she didn't have them to wear. But I think silly story, but it's a true story. But it just shows that in the wine world, there's a lot of paraphernalia that we can get stuck up in. But ultimately, there are many ways around this, and you just want to make sure you serve the wine in good condition. One interesting way to increase the sales of Tawny vintage ports. So Tawny, as Oscar said, you pull the cork, you've got 6 to 8 weeks in which to serve it. So wastage isn't really an issue, or if you're at home drinking it over a few weeks. Whereas vintage, because it hasn't had that period of oxidation, the process of decanting it, you're adding the oxygen into it, and so you've got 3 or 4 days in which to drink the wine before it starts losing that fruit quality, which could be a concern in terms of wastage in a restaurant or even at home. So with a young one, you could use Coravin because the sediment is still not present. With an older one, it's a bit more difficult. A concept we came up with that works really well in America and is starting to take off a bit in Europe is vintage port for the weekend. It doesn't necessarily have to be the weekend. You choose the first of your busiest 3 days of service, and you offer it. You decant a bottle at the beginning of that, so maybe Thursday morning, so you've got Thursday lunch, dinner, Friday lunch, dinner, maybe Saturday, and decant it, and you offer it as a special at the start of service, like you would say, we've got 3 Dover sold today, or whatever, would you like to reserve one? And depending on your measure, you've got about 15 glasses in a decanter. If you can't sell those over your 3 days of service, you probably need to find new staff to work in your restaurant. But on a serious note, you say, look, we've got a Quevedo 2017 vintage port, it's absolutely delicious, decanted this morning, would you like to reserve a glass? It's amazing, you've sold half the decanter before you've even bought them their cocktail, their glass of champagne at the start of the meal. And it works surprisingly well, and the customers we've tried it with have often end up decanting another 2 or 3 bottles by the end of that period. So it's a nice way to show something a bit different, a bit special to your customers. Or at home, we don't have a problem with decanters lasting more than 3 days. So, anyway, I've gone on a little bit. I'll let Oscar.
Let's just say a couple of things. Vintage port nowadays, in terms of what it needs for the winemaker, is totally different of what it was 100 years ago, 200 years ago. So vintage port 200 years ago was the production of a certain vintage, let's say 1850. So the vintage of 1850 was pretty much all into what's called the vintage category, because they were on other. It was the port of that vintage. Nowadays, it's less than 1% of the total production for the vintage category. So it's something really special. And that explains why it's higher in price than what you have for other ports. It's something that for the winemaker is putting a lot of effort. He's picking, selecting the best grapes to go into the vintage. Something that we produced today is going to be judged in 20, 30, 40 years.
They're really special wines.
These are very, very special ones, and it's something that we want to make with the best of the best grapes. So don't be surprised that a bottle of vintage port goes over the 100 to 100 pounds, because that reflects the scarcity of the vintage port, but also its quality.
So is that how many bottles of the 2017?
We made 5,000 bottles.
It's almost nothing. They're really, really specialist, incredible wines. The best probably example of port, really, and a winemaking technique. And they're phenomenal wines. Obviously, very different in terms of that evolution of how they go. But what we wanted to show was that richness, that opulence in the young vintage ports, which then slowly starts to fade as these lovely, dry, figgy characteristics come through in the more evolved one. Actually, neither one of our ports, but one of our friends in there, Newport, 2017 vintage, was served recently on the Fat Ducks tasting menu, which a lot of people might have thought was very young, but it worked phenomenally well. And I think it just goes to an example. It goes to show how these wines are very pairable with food. And whilst one might think of sweetness with a tawny, you look more like savoury of opposites with vintage. So cheese is the obvious, but also fruit, that sharpness in fresh fruit works very well. And or just on its own in a glass as a meditative drink.
I'd like to say a few more things before we go into the question and answers part, and that's a bit to motivate the 50% that never have been to Douro yet, but Adam made a question. So the Douro is the oldest wine region in the world. It was demarcated in 1756. In that year, there were two other wine regions that existed, but they were not demarcated. One in Italy, Chianti, another one in Hungary. That's easy. Okay. None were regulated at the time. So when the King Joseph I decides to regulate the Douro, he was a pioneer, and he's setting the basis for the drink that the beverage that we have now. The Douro represents 50% of the mountain farming in the world for wines. So it's really amazing from a landscape perspective. The Douro is a river that starts in Spain. In Spain they call it Quevedo. There are two great wine regions that exist because of that region, Ribera del Duero and Douro. When it gets to Portugal, we call it Douro. We change a little bit pronunciation just to make it more complicated. That's the river area is part of the UNESCO heritage, and it's has been very well protected to preserve it as it is. So on a tourism perspective, you have a great time visiting the region. Make sure that you visit the city of Porto, but go also up into the valley, which is about 2 hours, 1.5 to 2 hours away. There's a beautiful train that runs back and forth. It takes some time, but you will see a great landscape. So, and knock on our doors, because we'll be around.
I agree. I mean, we're biased, because we grew up there, but generally think it's one of the most beautiful places in the world. UNESCO obviously agree with us because they made it a World Heritage Site, but it's a truly special place. It's just going there helps you understand the scale of what the Odor is. I mean, it's one of the last wine producing regions in the world that is almost entirely unmechanized. Everything's still picked by hand. It's a labour of love. It's a hard place to farm. Like, we're farming on the edge of where agriculture is possible. There's a reason grapes and olives are basically the only things that grow up there, apart from the odd citrus tree, because nothing else can. But this harsh, hot, dry climate is what creates these phenomenal wines. So the vine has to strive so hard, so we get really intense, concentrated fruit. To put it in perspective, so our yields are, if we're lucky, a kilo of vine. Here in the Odor, in Bordeaux, they're 3 or 4 kilos. In the New World, they're 14 to 16 kilos of wine. So yeah, there's a reason there aren't many multinationals involved in the port trade, because they're not mad.
On a numbers perspective, yeah, it's like the financials aren't really, are not easy at all.
But it's a labour of love, and it's really special to share these wines with you guys. And you know, obviously we're here talking about our wines, but really we're here talking about School of Port, and how School of Port can help you guys then transmit it to everybody. It's like, we only do the half of it. We make the wines. Without you guys, it doesn't work. We sort of, it's a partnership. We need you guys, and we need to make the wine, and hopefully to a good enough quality. And then it's working with you guys to then transmit that to the end consumer. And anything we can do to help you, we are. But like, firstly, from I think both of us, thank you for your support and for being here. And hopefully School of Port can be of interest for you guys to take it to the next level.
I particularly loved the 20-year-old Tawny. I adored the theatre of pouring from such a big bottle. And it seems to me that 20-year-old Tawny gives you as a winemaker the most chance to intervene in what actually comes out at the end compared to the other methods. Is that your view
of
as
this
well?
lineup of wines?
Yeah.
Yes, I'd say. Feel free to disagree. So you do have, ultimately winemaking is the key, but I suppose, yeah, the end result, you have more control on how it will come out in the glass.
So as winemakers, how do you know when this wine is on the decline? Is it just experience you think, but there's enough in it that I know that's going to come back? Or how do you make that decision, well, let's bottle this now, because it seems to be, you know, you say you bottle it when it's at a peak. So how do you judge when the wine is on the, going through a little bit of a trough that you know it will come back again? How do you determine that, or is that too complex?
It goes in cycles, like life, like history. And there is a moment that the amount of tannins that we extract from the skin of the grapes, of the red grapes, for the production of vintage port is as much as we can. And that's what's going to bring the longevity. Together with acidity, which is going to bring the tension. Acidity is, I think the best way to describe acidity is like the golden apple that is very green, or that same apple that you wait for a month on your table and then it gets yellow and gets more soft and sweeter. So acidity brings the tension to the wine, and that is very important also for port. And it's right there hiding behind the tannins. Once the tannins start to get very soft, the port is probably at a certain peak, and it will go slowly down. But contrary to the wine in which the curve is probably more closed and fast, port can extend for many more decades. And maybe some of us here in this room have tasted port that is over 100 years. And you wouldn't expect a wine to be able to live for that period of time. And if you ask me, was it at its peak? Maybe not. It was past peak. But what I experienced in terms of flavors, in terms of aromas, it's something that I don't find anywhere in the world. You know, it's not. There's no food that can bring me that experience. So that's why port is so amazing, and it's probably the drink in the world that ages the best. It's the wine in the world that ages the best. combination of tannins, alcohol, sugar, and acidity. So there is a theoretic peak for a bottle of vintage port, which I agree, to be in perfect conditions, like to have still the freshness and the tannins and the intensity. But what ages, what gives you behind that peak, it's something that in many cases can be very, very interesting.
And how you know that a vintage might have that as a young wine is, does it have that structure, that tannic structure, but also that purity of fruit and the balance of the acidity to have that sort of staying power to last for a long time. If it doesn't quite have that structure, it might fade a bit earlier. And probably on the flip side, on the single harvest of the creators, is I suppose that peak might be when that vibrancy of fruit is really showing very well, balancing with the other oxidative notes.
I was going to say, thank you so much. It was a stunning comparison of the two vintage ports. And blind tasting on this 2017, we've almost seen some really beautiful aromatic red wine. So it's really
it's quite
fresh.
vintage, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't expecting it. I do love vintage port. So it's a really nice comparison of the savoury versus the freshness. So how long, I mean, what's sort of best in classes and how long would you keep the 2017? When is the right time? Because my brain is boggled. I love the savouriness of the sort of, what is it, the 1994?
It's a hard question.
Yeah.
Your palate and my palate are different. I think that's the lovely thing about wine, and all of us in the room. We all have slightly different preferences. Different markets different nations tend to consume their vintage ports at slightly different stages. So in France, they tend to drink them relatively young, whereas in the UK, we drink them older. And that, I think the UK, like I said before, sometimes guilty of always thinking all wines are better older. Personally, I think it's quite nice to follow the evolution of a wine. Because if you buy a case or a couple of cases, you can every couple of years see it, and then you start to build a picture of that wine and know its evolution. Otherwise, as Oscar was saying, you might come to it and it's past its peak, and it's really sad that you missed that like vibrant, youthful stage. Yeah, I think.
I don't think there's an answer
preference.
for that. Honestly, I don't think it really relates to your preference. Do you prefer it fresh and it's packed with the black fruit, a bit of the spices, a bit of that intensity, very kind of overwhelming on the palate, or do you prefer more elegance, more delicate? Then you wait maybe 3 or 4 decades.
Yeah, I suppose if we all went for dinner, probably the people in the restaurant would have a heart attack because there's so many things. But we'd likely order, when you go out with friends, you order slightly different things because you might prefer one style of cooking and I prefer Italian or whatever it is. You know, it's the same as wine.
Well, thank you ever so much. Sorry, yeah, please.
2017 is a 10/10. Was it year rating? Outstanding year?
A phenomenal year, yeah.
Sorry, which year was that?
2017. These 2 years, actually, are 2 of the best. I mean, with port, we sort of bucked the trend versus other regions in that we don't always declare our top wine in every year. So it's slightly more than we used to, but we only will declare the wine if the quality is outstanding, and it's a tiny percentage of our top quality grapes that go into vintage. So if it is a vintage, you already know that it's excellent, and yes, 17 was one of the best of the last 20 years.
Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you enjoyed it.